that sort of understanding. Rather, that we're not a child that does not have a say in how it is our relationship is supposed to show up. So our relationship with our fathers are very complex in many ways. And there's this love-hate, joy and sorrow, good and bad, and all the dynamics that show up around those. My wife Karen he's passed away in 2007, so she had what I thought was a very confusing relationship with her father, because she knew that he loved her, and she also knew that she loved him. So she had this sense that she knew that he loved her, and she knew that she loved him, and yet their relationship was one of resisting the behavior that seemed to show up, or her perception of his behavior and how it showed up in her life. So she was always under the perception that everything that he was doing was with the idea that she was being manipulated into doing something that she didn't want to do. Do you hear that? Okay. So all of the conversation was a setup for manipulation. And of course I didn't experience it that way because I didn't have the history that she was dealing with in her life experience. In so many ways I was able to temper some of that energy. And yet she loved him. And he loved her. That there was this, you could tell that there was this presence of love. And so I believe that at some level, all of us who are fathers planned our children for our pleasure. And they exist for the purpose of pleasing me. I want to explain that because it's an interesting way of showing up. The truth is that our children don't pleasure us by what they do. They pleasure us simply because they exist and for no other reason. They are pleasing to me simply because they are in my life as a father. And I pleasured my father simply because I existed, simply because I was there in that presence. So pleasure does not come from our children. It comes from, or in my sense, comes from me. So pleasure is a product of my own making. And I choose how to experience my children in relationship to what our relationship is about. Now, my children can bring me pleasure even when I'm angry at them, even when I'm frustrated with them, even when I'm off the wall with them. And I know that a couple of weeks ago I was mad at Caroline about something, and I said, Caroline, I'm angry with you, and I wouldn't be angry if I didn't love you. Which is a statement that I have learned to say because it not only brings them in relationship to me, it brings me in relationship to what's going on. I wouldn't be angry. You know, we can't have negative feelings towards our children unless we love them. Do you hear that? Anger, frustration, all those things that show up in that arena is because we love them, not because we don't love them. And so it's important for us first, if we wish to have our children pleasure us, is to acknowledge that, because it acknowledges that within ourselves. When I say that, those words, I am angry at you because I love you, what happens? The feeling of love becomes the dominant presence in terms of what it is that we're dealing with. Do you hear that? And that's an important part of how our children please us. They please us not by what they do, but because they simply are. A product of our creative energy. In a biblical context, in Matthew 7 through 11 it says, and it kind of talks about that relationship. It says, ask and it will be given you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If then you who are evil, if you who do bad things, occasionally, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Now, is that not the relationship that we have with our children? Pleasure is not what children give you, it is what you give them. That's where the pleasure comes from. It is in the giving of ourselves that we receive pleasure from our children. It's an understanding that I think is very important, because Jesus said, it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. It is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. It is my good pleasure to give of myself to my children. That is what pleases me. That is what I know pleased my Father. When my Father had the opportunity to give, that pleased him more than anything. Pleasure comes from what I can do, not what they do. It comes from what I do, not what they do. So giving includes, I think, more than just the material things we do, but it's also the passing of attitudes and thoughts and experiences, so on and so forth. My daughter Bridget called me a couple weeks ago, and she was getting towards the end of her master's program, and it was a pretty big deal, and she was doing a lot of sacrifice. She called me and she said, I'd like to borrow some money. And I said, well, how much do you need? She said, I need a couple $100. And I said, well, Bridget, I need to tell you that I don't loan my kids money. But I will give you the $200 because that pleases me. It's what I want to do. Do you see the dynamic that's going on? It pleases me. It doesn't please me to loan money, but it does please me to give money because I'm contributing towards something important. And it sort of led to a conversation that we had, and it was very sweet and very powerful. And then last week at Caroline's graduation, I made some comment about being an ATM machine, So she sent me a Father's Day card that sort of reflected that. Pleasure is not bestowed, it is the very experience of giving. It is in relationship to that. I know that Karen's dad was very proud of her, but he was not able to say it. But he experienced it, and I saw it in the way he talked, the way he talked to me about her. I wrote about 14 years ago, I was sort of in that space where I wanted to acknowledge my father, and it was his 74th birthday. And so I wrote him a letter, and I decided I wanted to share that letter with you today. I found it a couple of weeks ago, actually. I was going through some stuff. And it kind of reflects what it is that I'm talking about today. It says, this is March 9th, 1995. It says, Dear Dad, I've been racking my brain trying to think of something I could get you for your birthday that would be unexpected and unique. After considering several different options, I decided to do what I've been wanting to do anyway, and enclose this letter with the very appropriate card I got for you as an expression of some thoughts and feelings I think are important.